Hey everyone, welcome to Your Virtual Coffee, the web show which introduces you to great local businesses in the Denver metro area. You guys, I'm so excited for today. My guest is Liz Wendling, president of Insight Business Consultants and Rainmaking for Lawyers. She combines a rock solid sales background with a passion for coaching. Her innovative approach supports business professionals in opening doors, closing sales, which is important, and building relationships, even more important. Liz has coached thousands of professionals to build solid business skills, develop a success mindset, exceed their sales presentations, and prosper in any economy. And with that, Liz, welcome to my show.
Thank you, Gina. Good morning.
Good morning to you. I would like for my audience to get to know you a little bit on a personal level. So, what was your favorite subject in school?
Hands down, it was anatomy and physiology. I was intrigued by the body and its capabilities, and I still am today. I still read books on it. And there was just a love of the human body and what it was capable of doing, and the mind as well. So not just the body, it's the mind.
So, how did you kind of make that transition into what you're doing now? Because that's kind of interesting, the study of human bodies. I mean, I think I see the correlation there, especially of the mind. But could you elaborate on that?
Well, it was my favorite. It was the one that lit me up the most. But I did like business classes as well, and I realized I didn't want to make a living as a doctor or going to do anything with the human body. My mom's a nurse, and we always said none of us are going to be a nurse, and I just went the business route, and that's why I have a business today. Is because of that. Because I've always wanted to be my own boss, but I didn't necessarily have the I didn't want to launch out on my own unless I was pushed to do that. And then once I got laid off, that was where the opportunity presented itself.
Oh, that's interesting. So, is that how you got into business and sales coaching?
That was it. Yes. I always had a business. I mean, I was always in some form of business development, marketing, or sales for a couple of decades. And it wasn't until I got kicked out. But meanwhile, in the back of my head, I always knew I was going to be a business owner. I just didn't know when. Who gives up? This is my parents talking. Who gives up a good job with great benefits to go start something with a big question mark? And that was always in the back of my mind. But as soon as I was laid off, I thought, this is it. This is the perfect opportunity. I don't know if it's going to present itself again. So I took what I learned over all those years of being in business, and I set out to develop my own coaching and consulting practice, and I've been doing it ever since.
Now, speaking of business, you are also an incredible author, which, guys, check her out on Amazon. She has several books there. Would you share about your latest, The Heart of Authentic Selling? Because that kind of sounds like an oxymoron.
For a lot of people, it does. And that's the book. That's the one that really came out of me. It was as if it was written on its own, because I realized so many people were craving that authentic connection. They were sick and tired of the BS in every profession of people saying, I'm not trying to sell you anything. And then they step into selling them something, or they would say, oh, I'm just serving. But in reality, they were showing up as a salesperson. And it was all this, again, that oxymoron. But people weren't stepping into their sales conversation from that place, from their heart, not their head, from their body, not their logic. And talking to people as human beings, talking to people as they're the most important person they're ever going to talk to that day. And I wrote that book especially because almost every day, I don't care what profession anyone is in, is people tell me, I love what I do, but I hate to sell. I love my work, but I don't like what I have to do to attract clients and close business. And that told me that they have a super outdated belief that selling is about having to push, convince, or manipulate people. Now that's selling from the 80s and the 90s. So they're stuck in this 80s and 90s mindset, and they don't realize that now they have the opportunity to sell the way that resonates with them, to develop a sales style that fits who they are. So my book goes into what selling is today. Selling is about that genuine human interaction and guiding people to make buying decisions that are in their best interest. And it's both client-centered and human-centered. And that's what people want today. Like I said, they're tired of the BS. They're tired of being sold something instead of two people having a conversation to figure out if I'm the right person for you and you're a good client for me, and vice versa.
So salespeople, you hear it right here. Leave the techniques from the 80s and 90s back there and only bring the music forward, because we like that.
We definitely do. I like that analogy. That is great. And I listen to a lot of mock consultations, and I'll listen to a lot of recordings that companies will send me. And the 80s and 90s is still present. I hear it all day, every day. And some of it is still even being taught. So a lot of times people don't realize that they've dragged their old skills of the past into the future. And it's what's turning off that smart and savvy new consumer. And I know people aren't doing it on purpose, but they don't realize that they're dragging their old skills into a new world with a new consumer. Everything is different now, and we can't drag those old skills. So these very people who say, I don't want to be salesy, are actually showing up salesy. I don't want to be pushy, but they're using skills from the past that make them sound pushy.
So could you kind of compare and contrast an example of this? So like what a sales pitch from the 80s and 90s looks like versus a more authentic one for today.
Two that just popped into my head. The first one is using a lot of I language. I would like to do this. I would like to set up an appointment. I would love to talk to you about, I'd be happy to help you, instead of inviting someone into that conversation. So if you're using a lot of I statements, that is self-serving, and that's old school. That's the stuff that's 80s and 90s, versus saying to someone, instead of saying, I would love to schedule a time to talk to you, which is so self-serving because it's what you would love to do. When you say to someone, I would love to pick your brain, or I would love to set up an appointment with you, what about me? Don't I have a say in this? Don't I get to be invited into this conversation? So it's shifting the language a little bit to make it you-centered. How do you feel about grabbing coffee? Or how do you feel about getting an appointment on the books? How do you feel about syncing up our calendars and having a conversation? That's an invitation, whereas I would love to do this sounds like a command. No one wants a command. That's 1980s and 90s. And a lot of times that makes people back away versus lean in. And the other one is the F word, follow up, follow up. And that today it's still being used, following up, touching base, reaching out and checking in. Well, we've been doing that since the 80s and the 90s. And I tell people, why do you have to announce that you're following up? I'm just following up. And everyone is using the same words, but it isn't creating someone to get back to you. It doesn't cause people to get back to you if you are just following up. Your follow-up messages have to have value. That's the only way people get back to you. So that could be another 2-hour conversation, but it's stuff like that people say, I don't sell. I don't want to sound like a salesperson. Yet they throw those two things out all day, every day, and they're making themselves look like that they got stuck in the 90s.
Oh, those are excellent points. I love that. Now, you also have another book, which I love, called The Rainmaking Mindset for Attorneys. In the rules of professional conduct, the lawyers who are all watching this are going to know what I'm about to say, that you can't solicit. And I have a feeling that when you mention selling, lawyers probably just squeeze out and say, oh, I can't do that. So could you expand on the difference between solicitation and selling?
Absolutely. And you're right. They definitely clump those two together, and they couldn't be farther apart. Solicitation means you are out there banging on doors or you're asking people for business, where you're pushing yourself on someone. That's how I take it. And solicitation, in my eyes, is like marketing. You're out there telling people who you are and what you do. That's a form of solicitation. But when it comes to selling, many attorneys resist that. They have a lot of resistance around that word because of the mindset that they think selling is. They think they've got to push themselves on people, or they have to put on white patent leather shoes and sound like an old school salesperson, when in fact, that is the complete opposite of what selling is today. So every attorney sells legal services, whether you want to embrace that or not. But the attorneys who are embracing that are killing it, because they realize if they're not out there having conversations with people who may want to do business with them, then someone else is actually going to be doing that. So when it comes to a sales conversation or a client consultation, that is your opportunity to be able to build trust and credibility, talk about the value you provide. That is selling, not trying to pound your fist on the desk and convince someone to buy from you. Selling is about an updated skill that allows someone to see the way that you're going to be if they hire you. And a sales conversation or a client conversation or an initial consultation is the things that you do and the conversations you have with a potential client that converts them into a happy paying client. And what that means is how you connect, how you engage, the words you use, the value you provide, the way you make them feel, the way you listen to them. That's sales, not that other stuff that you're telling yourself is all about sales. And I watch many attorneys go broke resisting the fact that they don't want to have a sales conversation, when in fact, every business stays in business because someone is closing business. And it's about time that that mindset gets changed if attorneys really want to change their bottom line. The resistance and fear has to be dropped. Otherwise, someone is going to your competition because they learned how to have that conversation with a client.
Now, you mentioned resistance and fear. What is an issue that keeps your client up at night, and how do you solve it?
It would be the big one, and that's why I teach sales, is that they're not closing enough business. They really believe that when someone says, I don't have the money, or now's not the right time, or I need to think it over, they believe that that's the case. In most cases, it's not. Most people, when they sit down and talk to an attorney or any other professional, they have a rough idea of what it's going to cost them. So they use that language and they'll say, oh, I don't have the money, or that's more than I wanted to spend, because it's easier to say that than to say to an attorney or a professional, you didn't show me your value. You didn't connect with me and treat me like the most important person you've spoken to today. You didn't show me and tell me what you can do for me or how you can help me solve my problem. You missed the skills, or you lacked the skills that opened me up and wanted me to listen to you and lean in and listen to you. Because I always say that your ability to sell and to communicate your value will determine if people trust you, buy from you, follow you, listen to you, or dismiss you. And if that conversation doesn't have all the elements of, I want your business and I'm going to talk to you about how we go about doing that, then they're going to go to someone else. Because if you're missing some of those elements, then you're telling someone that I don't really need your business. I don't really want your business, even though I know that's not what you're trying to convey, but you're missing the people skills, the communication skills, and those sales and conversion skills that make someone say, I like this person. I could see this person helping me. I like the way they're communicating with me. And if I hire them, I'm going to get that same person back. It's incongruent. If you're not communicating and talking to them in a way that opens them up, why would they want to do business with you? Because you're giving them a glimpse of who you're going to be once they write that retainer check. And they will not write that check unless all those elements are in there that show that I have value, I bring value to the table, and I am the right person for you without ever having to say that. You just convey it in the way that you show up.
Let's talk about power partners. Now, for our audience, power partners are those businesses who target your same ideal client, but are not your competition. One that I like to use would be, actually, here's a great one, and I just created it for this show. It would be a family law attorney and perhaps a probate attorney. And you're like, why? Because they both target people who may be going through an emotional time for various reasons. Sometimes in probate matters, there are property that was held by both parties or wasn't held by both parties. And there are issues, whether it's children, whether it's taking care of the children. Family law addresses part of it. Probate addresses another side of it. So with that being said, and again, they don't compete with each other because one does family law, one does probate. So with that, let's get an understanding of your ideal client, Liz. Who is that?
That would be someone who is making all the right moves in their business or practice. They're doing their marketing and social media and maybe a little bit of networking. They may be speaking and writing and using some of the social media platforms. They're doing all the right things, which is the stuff that attracts clients. That's all it does. It does not get someone to write you a check. So they're doing all the right moves, but they're not closing business. They're not winning business. They're not hearing yes enough. What they are hearing is, I need to think it over. I can't afford it. I don't have the time. I have to check with my spouse. And they're using excuses not to hire. And that's the evidence right there that says there's something broken or missing in that part of the sales conversation or client conversation where they're not feeling confident and comfortable in hiring. So an ideal client would be someone who's doing all the right stuff and they know it, but their bottom line isn't changing, or they keep hearing way more excuses than they want to. So they know something is off and they want to get to the root of that.
So I'm thinking those businesses that are in the fractional space would probably be pretty good partners for you. So I'm thinking, fractional CFOs, because maybe there's a money issue as far as cash flow. COOs who, they need someone to take a look at the operations, see if everything's clicking on all four cylinders.
Correct. Or even the managing partner who's sending their attorneys in to meet with potential clients, and the attorneys coming out and saying, they're not a good client. They didn't have the money. And ask the question, wait a minute, maybe it's what we're doing in the consultation that's causing that to happen. So it's looking at it with a different lens, not the typical lens of let's market more, let's do more search engine optimization. No, let's find out why all those clients that we spent so much money on to get in front of an attorney is not working. That's the problem. And I just see that happen so much. They turn the heat up on the marketing thinking, let's just get more leads. But why not make the best of the leads you have, doing the best that you can?
And plus, there's a rule of thumb when it comes to marketing. It is far cheaper to take care of the client you already have than to try to go out to get a new one.
Yes. And legal marketing is expensive.
Exactly. And you've mentioned this a couple of times, and I'm familiar with it because I read your book. You talk about someone disqualifying a client or potential client because they don't have the money to pay.
Yep.
Or they've said, I can't afford this. Could you expand on what the hidden detail that we're not talking about in that?
It could be two things. Let's just take out the person who really can't afford it, which could be a small amount of people. Let's get rid of those. When someone says, I can't afford it or it's too expensive, what they're really saying is, I don't see the value. I don't see the value in giving you a $5,000 check because the way that you talked to me and communicated with me and engaged with me didn't light me up, didn't make me feel like I want to do business with you. That's what they're really saying under the surface. And when people tell you that and you hear that a little more than you'd like to hear, it really what they're saying is you're missing the mark with me as a human being. You're missing the human element that gets me to feel comfortable in saying yes and be confident in my buying decision.
Well, it sounds like too, basic capitalism. We as consumers want people who want our business.
Yes, isn't that crazy? Yep.
What a concept.
Yep.
So the question is, when you're on that other side, when
Yep.
you're that business, you know, that's when they need to reach out to you and say, I'm not really sure I'm making my client or my potential clients feel like I care, feel
That's
like
it.
I want their business.
Yes, and it's subtle shifts in the way that you're engaging that actually makes someone start qualifying you, not disqualifying you. In their head, they're thinking, I don't want to, I'm not hiring this person. They'll sit there and nod and say, thank you for the information. But in their head, they've already decided, I wouldn't hire that person if he or she did it for free. What we want is the opposite to happen. I like the way this person is talking to me. I like the way she is communicating with me about my problem. I like the way he's handling my situation. That's what we want them to do. And they can't get there unless you shift the way that you're being and the way you're communicating with them.
Now, you've mentioned a couple of times, especially in your book, the Rainmaking Mindset for Attorneys. It sounds like you have some inside information on what goes on in a consultation.
Oh, yes.
Could you expand on that?
It's one of my favorite parts of my practice, and I am a law firm secret shopper. So law firms hire me to go undercover in their firm, and it's all set up through the firm. I have a fake name and a fake situation. But let's say whether it's a DUI, a personal injury, or a divorce, I go in with the mindset, the emotion of a person in that situation. And I take on that persona, and I will have a full blown start to finish consultation with an attorney. And I will pick up on the good, the bad, and the really interesting. And I take notes and I report back to the managing partner why people are leaving their office, not hiring their attorneys. And what many times happens is it sounds like a generic initial consultation. It's any firm USA is using the same consultation, and there isn't a lot of that stuff, that new updated approach injected into that consultation. And it just feels like a legal conversation versus a human to human conversation. So they miss the mark on about a dozen places where that would help to build a connection or build some value. So when I report back to a managing partner that Chuck did this and he forgot to do this, or didn't elaborate on this, or didn't once use my name in a consultation, that's one of the biggest things that I find is they'll use my name in the beginning. They'll say, hi, Diane, nice to meet you. And not one time for another 45 minutes. Not one time will they say to me, Diane, thanks for sharing that information, or I appreciate you really telling me about your situation. It helps me understand where you are so I can talk about how I may be able to help. So Diane, I appreciate that. Or they forget that I'm a human being and they're talking to me like I am just another consultation. And it's sad because so much money is being left on the table because there's a few nuggets that are missed. And it's not the attorney's fault. They didn't learn this in law school. They didn't learn how to have an initial consultation that blows someone's hair back, knock their socks off, and makes them want to say yes. They don't know that. So it's not their fault, but it's no longer a good excuse to have good, ideal clients leave your firm saying no and hiring the competition. That means your marketing is working for the competition. Your hard-earned dollars are sending people to the competition. Ouch.
Yeah, ouch, indeed. Attorneys and law firm administrators and managing partners who are watching this, if what Liz is saying is really resonating with you, I highly recommend that you reach out to her, because this sounds like a pretty easy fix for a relatively difficult problem.
Yep.
So Liz, to all those millions of calls that you're about to get, what is the best way for those professionals to reach out to you?
Oh, they can start by sending an email at liz@lizwendling.com. They can go to the rainmakingcoach.com and check out. I have lots of videos on my website for attorneys to help them see some of the areas that they may have some blind spots to. And of course, all of my books are on amazon.com as well.
And you're on LinkedIn.
Absolutely.
Because I like to direct people to LinkedIn as well, because
Yes.
that's where we business people like to congregate.
Yes.
I wish we could do more of that. It's a passion of mine that I'm working on. All right, Liz, any last thoughts?
I would say it's time for attorneys to drop the resistance and fear around that one and only conversation that brings the business in, that closes the business, that gets someone to say yes. Learn those new skills, learn those soft skills that make people lean in, not back away.
I love it. Liz, thank you for coming on my show today.
Thank you, Gina. I appreciate it.
Audience, thank you for joining us today on Your Virtual Coffee. We could not do this show without you. Thank you for watching, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, which surprisingly is called Your Virtual Coffee. At our show, we love business professionals. So business people, let's talk. Thanks, everyone. Your Virtual Coffee is sponsored by Ventola Law. Ventola Law, mediation and legal representation at an expert level. You can find them at ventolalaw.com. Thanks for joining me today. For more information on Your Virtual Coffee, check us out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and wait for it, our website at yourvirtualcoffee.com. Thanks again for watching, and have an incredible day.